Hello again, and welcome to episode 3 of Beyond a Reasonable Stout. I'm Jonathan Nobles. I have been an attorney for the last several years, and this show combines two things that I really love. One is critiquing government systems, and the second is enjoying really good craft beer. And so, if you're not familiar with our show, what we do is we pick a style of beer and then we use it as a metaphor to discuss a particular government system and analyze it, talk about maybe what it's doing and things that can be improved. And if you're not familiar with that or that doesn't make sense to you, then just stick with us and I'm sure it'll make a lot of sense in a minute. So, not every system is loud. Some systems are just quietly annoying. You've got forms and letters and waiting rooms and just seemingly ordinary moments, but those moments can shape entire lives. And that's a lot like our beer of the week. This is the pilsner. And if you're not familiar with a pilsner, it's pretty clear. This has kind of a classic beer look, if you will, especially if you're kind of used to most of the beer that's made here in the U.S. It's balanced, it's precise, it's not overwhelming. It's just there. I mean, it's generally a good beer. And just a couple of fun facts about where it's from. The Pilsner was first brewed in 1842 in a Czech town called Pilsen, which is why it's called a Pilsner. It was an attempt to make beer clearer and cleaner and more consistent. It ended up being the model for a lot of the beer people drink. I like to say this is kind of the ancestor of a lot of the mass-produced American lagers that a lot of people drink. In fact, I really could have used that as a metaphor, but this is all about craft beer. So I wanted to kind of take a step back and do something a little more interesting. Nothing against American beer. If that's what you're into, then go for it. But I wanted to take a bit of a step back in history and look at something that really kind of predates a lot of the stuff that we see today, but really is kind of where it came from, and it has kind of the same feel. It looks really simple. Again, this just kind of looks like a beer, and it kind of tastes like a beer. But it's actually really precise. It's got some complexity that is easy to overlook. And it's like a lot of systems. The most normal systems often hold the most power. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about bureaucracy in systems. And by the way, we generally on this show, we talk about government systems. And trust me, there is plenty of bureaucracy in any level of government you want to look at. And the larger the level, the more bureaucracy you have. It's all over the place. However, I want to be very careful because there are a lot of people who assume that the only real bureaucracy is the federal government or the state government or the local government. And if you just privatize everything would be fine. I have worked in and around enough large private organizations to tell you that there is plenty of bureaucracy. So to me, it's not necessarily a function of whether a system is public or private. It really just kind of becomes a matter of the larger a system gets, the more rules you have, the more policies you have, and so the more bureaucratic it becomes. And the thing about bureaucracy is nobody sets out to make a system complicated. Well, maybe some people do. But in general, I think most people understand that we want to make things simple. We want to make things easy, but it's just the nature of humanity. The larger things get, the more rules we have to put into place, and then those rules have to be followed. And then you have rules that reinforce those rules. And ultimately you have people who don't really understand where the rules came from. They just know the rules are there, and they know that they don't have the authority to override those rules, and so they have to enforce them. And that's when it becomes incredibly frustrating. So we're going to be talking about government bureaucracy, but just know that your average corporation has plenty of bureaucratic nonsense baked in. And if you've dealt with private healthcare systems, for example, you know how difficult it can be to get things done. It's definitely there. So just the mechanics of a bureaucracy in general, like I said, there's plenty of rules, but they're rules without faces. You don't, there's really not a face you can kind of tie to this rule. There's not a person that you can point to and say, you're the one that put this rule in place, therefore I'm really upset at you. It's just the nature of the system. Decisions are made by process. They're not necessarily made by people at some point, because that's kind of the idea, is you get these rules in place and it takes the human decision making out of it. Definitely an oversimplification, but I think the stereotype is the mid-level bureaucrat who isn't paid to think. They're just paid to enforce this rule. And I'm sorry, you didn't bring the wrong form. You didn't fill this out correctly. You didn't follow the right steps. So there's really nothing we can do for you. And that's kind of the thing that we all end up following. It's not nefarious. It's frustrating. And you want to get frustrated at somebody, but you don't really know who to be frustrated with. It just kind of happens. And because of those rules, then things get delayed. Eligibility may change. One of the things I work with immigration. I work with immigrants in my practice, and I will say that it is you don't see frustratingly painful bureaucracy to a greater level anywhere else as you do in the immigration system. And we talked about that a couple of episodes ago, and so I won't go into that again, but just to say it is absolutely maddening. And that's even before some of the more recent developments, which again, we won't go into. If you missed our first episode, go back and watch it. But even before any of that happened, the immigration process was just extremely bureaucratic and frustratingly so. And so you have people who, okay, they might be eligible for something right now, but if enough time passes, they may not be eligible anymore. And it's not because anybody intentionally delayed something. It's just because it virtually sat on somebody's desk until it just didn't get addressed for whatever reason. And that kind of stuff happens. And paperwork kind of becomes the king. It's all about the paperwork, and just used to be stacks upon stacks upon stacks. Now it's byte upon byte upon byte because everything's digital. Although you would be surprised at the number of trees we end up killing just for the sake of government agencies. A lot of stuff still has to be done on paper, but of course more is done electronically. So regardless of whether it's on paper or whether it's digital, there's just so many forms that have to be filled out, whether you're going to the DMV or whether you're applying for a license of some sort. It's just constant, and it just keeps going. And it's powerful. I mean, these bureaucracies are powerful, and that's the frustrating part, because it doesn't seem powerful. I know very little about martial arts, and I know very little about jiu-jitsu in particular, but what little I do know, is my understanding is that jiu-jitsu is one of those arts where you don't necessarily have to be a powerful person in general to overcome someone. You just have to know the right techniques. And that's why, like in mixed martial arts, for example, some of the earliest people who were really successful were jiu-jitsu artists, because they knew how to get a bigger person on the ground, choke them out, make them submit. And to me, that's kind of a good metaphor for bureaucracy as well. It doesn't look powerful, and it may not seem powerful on the surface, but before you know it, it's just kind of overwhelmed you to where you don't really know what to do anymore. And you just have to submit. You just have to say, okay, it makes absolutely no sense that I have to do this way, but obviously I'm not going to get what I need any other way. So just throw this 500-page application at me. I'll spend the next 4 years of my life filling it out, and then hopefully I'll get whatever benefit it is that I'm supposed to get that I no longer need anymore, because this has taken so long. And I'm being facetious, but that's kind of what it feels like sometimes when we're dealing with this kind of bureaucracy. And eventually it just kind of becomes normalized. Like everything else we talk about, eventually you get to the point where you say, you know what, this is just the way this works. And you don't question it. You don't think about it. You just accept it. Weird people like me are the only ones that question it, and then I end up doing stuff like this and just ranting about it for a while. And you're obviously watching it, so maybe you're questioning it too. And I hope so, because we need to question things like this. But that's the nature of bureaucracy, is especially governmental bureaucracy. We just know we can't fight it. So we just come to accept it. Routine just replaces questioning. And in many cases, and I see this in my practice all the time, I go into courtrooms, and this probably isn't true with all judges. And I'm certainly not going to name judges because I still have to work. But all I'll say is, in general, it seems to be kind of a requirement to be a judge where you kind of have to stop thinking logically, and you have to kind of take context and nuance and put them aside and just say, okay, this is what the law says, this is what the facts are, this is how they apply, this is what I'm ruling. And on some level, I get that. On some level, I understand. But when you're on the other side and you're actually trying to argue something and help that judge see what's really going on, it's maddening that they don't necessarily want to see the context behind the action or the circumstances. Some do, but just in general, it seems like there are a lot that don't want to see the circumstances. They just say, okay, X happened, the law says Y, therefore Z, end of story, and that's it. Now, I have had situations where a judge, for example, might say, okay, yes, this was technically a crime, for example. However, under the circumstances, basically all you're getting is a slap on the wrist. And that's okay, sort of. It's still something on somebody's record. Even if basically all they had to do was just pay the court costs, they still were convicted of a crime. Even if it was something that can be very, very, at least I thought, could be very, very easily explained as to why it was appropriate. But judges don't always think that way. And I think, again, that's not nefarious. I think that's just the nature of the bureaucracy. And a lot of times, so in that context, I can look and say, okay, yes, Your Honor. I mean, I can't say it to them, but I can say after the fact, yes, Your Honor, you're the one that messed that up. So you're the one I'm mad at. But in some cases, with kind of everyday bureaucracy, there really isn't a villain. Again, there's no face you can put on it, so there's no real outrage. Well, there is outrage, but there's nobody you can point to and say, this is why this happened, and you're the one that did it, so you're the one that needs to fix it. It's not going to get fixed. It's just the nature of things. One of the things, speaking of this normalization, and this is where we're getting, well, it's true with governments as well as other entities, but one of the things that I find fascinating that we deal with all the time is, and somebody else has probably already coined this term, but if not, I'll claim it, what I'm just calling technological bureaucracy. And what I mean by that is when you have technical systems, computer systems, that have built in, because again, used to it was just paper. Now we have computer systems, but we see it's very pervasive. And I see it happening in three specific areas that I understand, but it doesn't stop me from being absolutely infuriated. One is multi-factor authentication, MFA, multi-factor authentication. And that's where you have an online account, your username, your password. Used to be that was enough. Now it's like, okay, now we have to authenticate you another way. We're going to send you a text message. You have to use an authenticator app, something like that. Okay, that's probably fine unless you didn't get the text message, or you can't find your phone, or you've changed numbers, or you don't have that email address anymore, or your authenticator app isn't working, and you just kind of go round and round. So it's fine, and I understand that it's designed to keep you safe and protect your data, and that's good. But it's great until it doesn't work, and then you're on the phone for 3 hours with tech support because you don't have access to any of the other things. So it's there to protect you, but it doesn't make it any less infuriating when it doesn't work. So that's one thing. Then very similar to that is the whole idea of the CAPTCHA. And we've all seen those. By the way, I didn't know this until I looked it up. CAPTCHA actually stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart. So basically, it's like it says, usually when you see one, verify that you're human. They want to make sure that you're not a bot, that you're actually a person. And again, that's a good thing, unless you can't figure out what those 5 characters are in that weird little symbol that they're trying to get you to, to decipher. Or you see all the pictures, pick all the ones with a car. Well, is that a car? Is that a dog? Is that and you go through, iteration after iteration, and you just can't figure it out. And once again, because you can't prove that you're human, you don't get access to whatever it is. And again, it's good, but it's still frustrating when it doesn't work. So so those two are very similar. And then the third, I think, maybe the most infuriating, the third one may be the most necessary, but sometimes it can be the most infuriating. And it's interesting when those are kind of in direct proportion. And that's the whole idea of online fraud prevention. Now, I get it. If somebody were to steal my credit card and use it for all kinds of stuff that I didn't buy, I don't happen to be in Aruba, I don't like caviar, I didn't spend $12,000, okay, great. I would want somebody to flag that and say, hey, did you do this? I get it. The problem is when you're using your card, whether it's tied to your bank account or your credit card, and this is something that you need right away. You wouldn't actually be buying it if it weren't something that you needed right now. And you go through the process and you think everything's done, and all of a sudden the transactions decline. It's like, wait a second. I know I had money in that account. I know I have room on that credit card. And then you get the text message. Hey, do you recognize this purchase? Yes or no? Yeah, it's me. I did it. And then so you have to do it again, and that's fine. What's not fine is when you either don't get that message or you don't see it, or they just say, hey, you need to call us right away, and you end up spending, you get transferred 3 different times and spend 30 minutes just to tell them, yes, it was me. I know what I did. Authorize this transaction because I needed this 5 hours ago, and now the fact that I don't have it is really causing me a lot of problems. So again, important, but very frustrating when it doesn't work. And of course, we all know that these companies, they're not doing it just to keep us safe. They're doing it because inconveniencing us is a lot easier for them to deal with than if our data were actually stolen or if our accounts were compromised. I get that. Thank you for doing that. But it's just another level of bureaucracy that we have to deal with that can cause real problems. Sometimes you just want to scream and say, yes, I know who I am human, I know what I did, I know what I bought, leave me alone. And so those are kind of the things we deal with, but we've just kind of accepted that that's the way things are because just about everybody's doing it because of so many data breaches. So I get it. Aside from my technological frustration, which is minimal, I just like to rant about it. There is a serious human effect when it comes to some of this bureaucracy, and there are things that really do have real world effects rather than just minor inconveniences. Client that I worked with, I just talked to him yesterday, applied for asylum. Asylum is still pending for lots of different reasons. Hopefully it'll be approved, but again, not to rehash a lot of immigration stuff, but one thing, for those of you who may not know, if you apply for asylum, 6 months after that asylum application has been accepted, even if it hasn't been approved yet, just the fact that it's been accepted, it's being processed, you are allowed to apply for a work permit. So this guy applied for his work permit because he desperately needed it. It was approved. As part of the work permit process, they make it easy when it works. When you apply for your work permit, you can also apply for a Social Security card because obviously not only do you need a work permit, but you need a Social Security number for your employer to legally pay you and withhold taxes and do all of those things. So we needed both. His work permit was approved. He got that. He was supposed to have gotten his Social Security card within 7 days after that. never showed up. So he went to his local Social Security office. They didn't have a record of the application on file, even though we applied as part of his work permit process. They didn't have a record, so they made him fill out another application. And they told him to wait. And then if you don't hear anything back from us, you can make another appointment. Well, he still hasn't heard anything, trying to make appointments, but now the soonest appointments he can get are weeks out. Meanwhile, he's had this work authorization for weeks. He is legally authorized to work, but because he doesn't have a social security number yet, simply because somebody dropped the ball, he still can't work. So this is a classic situation where the bureaucracy has caused real world problems for someone who was unable to legally support himself, even though the government has already said, yes, you have the right to work, but he doesn't have all the tools that he needs because somebody in the Social Security office, and again, it probably wasn't nefarious. It probably just got stuck somewhere. But the thing is, we don't know how to get it unstuck. And he's basically pleading with me. It's like, look, can't you do anything? And I basically just have to say, no. I wish I could. I absolutely wish I could do something, but there is absolutely nothing I can do. We're just stuck with it. And that's what bureaucracy does. Rules are fine. We have to have rules and we have to have policies. Any business. I run a small business. I have, it's me and 3 employees, but we have to have policies. And sometimes even that can feel bureaucratic. And I have to kind of watch myself to make sure that I'm not doing things that aren't necessary. But you do have to have certain policies in place no matter what size the organization. But when that gets, I think when that gets uncoupled from context, nuance, common sense, when rules are being, regardless of the size of the organization, when rules are being enforced arbitrarily, and you've lost the reason for why that rule was there to begin with, and you're not giving key people that you trust the ability to override those rules when it makes sense, that's when problems arise. I think the biggest problem most of us have, even if we don't see it, is when someone is saying, oh, that's just the rule. And you say, why? I don't know. That's just the rule. Well, don't you ever question it? No, it's just the rule. And that's when you want to scream or you want to throw the phone through the computer screen. But that's just where we are. And so all I'm saying is, yes, there is a certain level of bureaucracy that we have to live with. But I think we also should start questioning, is this level of bureaucracy really necessary? Even if we can't change it on a macro level. I mean, just sitting here, me talking, you watching, we're probably not in a position to make the federal bureaucracy or the state bureaucracy or even the local bureaucracy any easier. But I think we can start watching things locally, watching things that we do have control over, and make sure that if we're making rules in our own organizations, that we're not making them arbitrarily and we're not making things more difficult than they have to be, but also questioning, especially on a local level, maybe on a county level or on a city level or a municipal level. You say, okay, yeah, this is your rule, but why? And you can do that respectfully. You can do that politely. You can do that in such a way that's like, okay, I get it. That's the rule. I'm not questioning that it's a rule. I just want to know why it is the way it is. And hopefully there'll be people on the other side that have the authority to change things that will at least look at it with an open mind. Just like I'm hoping when I go into a courtroom, I have a judge that is willing to look at things and say, you know what? Yes, this is technically what the law says, but under the circumstances, I get it. So we're going to rule based on the actual situation. That's all we're asking for. So bureaucracy, again, it's kind of like our pilsner, and kind of like it's American lager descendants. It's cool. It's crisp. It's pretty simple. It's clear, and it's just there. But that's kind of the way our bureaucracies are. And I think it's time that we just started asking, is this level of bureaucracy necessary? And if it's not, what can we do about it? So thank you for watching Beyond a Reasonable Stout. Again, I'm Jonathan Nobles. And next time, change gears a little bit. We're going to talk about families and what happens when families go sour. So I hope you'll join us. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.